Hey everyone, welcome back to Pine Hollow Auto Diagnostics. 2009 Subaru Forester that's been sitting at the shop for a few months, taking up space. The customer apparently decided to stop driving it, and the shop owner actually bought this thing, but it's a beached whale and it's taking up space in the shop. So we're here to try to make it run. They've replaced some parts. I see a new ignition coil. They tried a different engine computer, so I plugged the original one back in. We got a fresh battery. So scanned it for codes. The engine computer seems to be online. It's happy. Let's crank it over, listen to how it sounds, and then take it from there. Alright, so let's crank it over. Alright, so you heard it tried to do something, but it was very uneven. Let's check the basics first, like the spark, the firing order, and hopefully this thing will fire up today. Alright, so on this coil pack, it has 4 outputs, obviously 4 cylinders, and they're very easy to mix up. So this is the driver's side bank, cylinders 2 and 4. So the bottom tower on the coil feeds cylinder 2, and the top tower feeds cylinder 4. On the other side, it's hard to tell which wire's which because on the drawing they have them kind of crossed. But we can look at the firing order: 1, 3, 2, 4. So it's a waste spark system, so we know 1 and 2 would be fired from one coil, and 3 and 4 would be fired from the other coil. So just by this diagram and the firing order, we can say the top tower fires cylinder number 4. So the companion for number 4, what's the companion for number 4? Number 3. Let's take a look at those plug wires. Alright, so we know the top tower on this side should be cylinder number 4. Follow the plug wire, and it goes to cylinder number 2. So these 2 plug wires are crossed, 2 and 4 are switched. Now, what about this side? Cylinder 1 goes to the top tower. So 1 and 4 are companions, right? And 2 and 3 are companions. So this side is correct. That's why it tried to start in 2 cylinders. These are obviously crossed. There's no contribution from this bank. So let's try switching these 2 plug wires around and see what happens. Alright, I went ahead and switched the 2 plug wires on this side of the coil. So the top tower now goes to cylinder number 4, and the bottom tower goes to cylinder number 2. Let's see what happens when we crank this thing over. Alright, here we go. On. I don't know if it has a clear flood mode. It might be completely fouled out with gas. We'll let it simmer just a little bit. Alright, I'm going to crank it over while watching some live data. Fuel pump, relay, engine speed, mass airflow. Almost. I'm going to have to take the plugs out and clean them out because they're probably completely fouled wet with gas. Might have to do that. So here are the spark plugs for cylinders 2 and 4, the ones that were crossed. Cylinder 2 is wet with gas, completely fouled out. It's all black, so I'm sure the spark isn't jumping from electrode to electrode. Cylinder 4, similar story. So what I like to do is just take a torch, propane torch, and keep that tip of the spark plug nice and hot until all the black carbon's burnt off. I've seen my grandfather do this trick, and it actually works pretty well. You can even put the plugs in the wires, make sure the spark is happening where it's supposed to, and then reinstall them on the vehicle. Go ahead. Alright, we're good. So we saw a spark on this one and not this one. So I switched the plugs around. This one sparked in this spark plug wire, so we'll see what happens here. Yep. So either this coil is dead, this one sparked, this one did not. Spare coil installed. We'll see if both of these spark plugs make a spark on a crank. Whatever, go ahead. Nope, no spark in number 2. Alright, so I swapped plug wires around. So before this spark was sparking, and if the coil here isn't activating, then, so we're worried about cylinder number 4. Basically they should switch if the plug wire is bad, or if the coil is bad, it'll stay on the same plug. If the plug wires are bad, it'll move to the different plug. So I just have a bypass wire going to the starter, so I don't have to keep asking the guys here to crank it. We'll crank it over with the key on. Let's see which spark comes to life. So look at that. I switched spark plug wires, and now this one isn't sparking, this one is. What does that tell you? Bad plug wire. Alright, so we got both plug wires replaced with something much better. They clip in nicer. So firing order is 1, 3, 2, 4. Let's see if both of these spark plugs fire when we crank the engine over. Ready? This one is still not firing. That would be cylinder number 2, one right here. Let's take a test light, crank it over, and see if the coil is putting out a spark to the test light. Ready? Nope, no spark. So this coil, the 1-2 coil, is dead or not firing. Sure enough, the number 1 spark plug is also completely black, fouled, wet with gas. Not surprising. Alright, so we got all the spark plugs laying on the intake manifold. These are brand new. Let's crank it over, see which ones spark, which ones don't. So this one, which is cylinder 3, is good. Number 4 is good. 1 and 2 are dead in the water. So is it a control side issue, or is it a coil issue? Alright, so next step at this ignition coil control plug, I want to check power, ground, and both control signals for the 2 waste spark coils. On the diagram, we have a ground on pin 3, power on pin 2, and then pins 1 and 4 are the control side pulses from the ECM. So with a test light with the key on, you can check the power right here. That's fine. You can check the ground just as easily, going from power. You find the ground, test light should light up nicely. So that pin right there should be a ground. It is. Now we can hook up the scope without hooking up the ignition coil and see if there are any pulses, or if we don't see either or, we'll hook it up to the coil and back probe these wires. Alright, so with the coil unplugged, I'm measuring the 2 control wires, 20 volt scale, and they're at 2.5 volts. That must be a bias voltage for a circuit integrity check from the computer. So I don't know if the computer will try to pulse these, but let's crank it over, see what happens. And let's okay, so we saw something on the blue trace, not on the red trace. So guys, from this one scope capture, can we say we need a new engine computer? We have bias voltage coming from the engine computer on both traces, but only one of them is pulsing. And that's the top one, channel 1. That would be the 3-4 coil. That's good. The 1-2 coil is dead in the water. Well, we do have a spare engine computer. We can plug that one in, see if it sparks at all. And that'll be pretty definitive. Alright, so the spare computer is plugged in. It's not programmed, but it should still make a spark, you would think, when we manually crank it. Let's see what happens. Okay, so we're starting at 0 volts on both control wires. Turn the key on. They're both at 2.5. Let's manually crank it. No spark on this one at all, on either trace. That's unfortunate. So with the replacement ECM, the security light's on, and how do we, can we sync the replacement to this car? There's the VIN of the donor vehicle. It is a 2009. So let's see if the TOPDON can do it. If not, I really don't know. So this code P1571, reference code incompatibility. That's the one we have to look up on ALLDATA, see how to program this computer. So in special functions, there is entry VIN. We can try that. Perform this function, test mode connector needs to be connected, and that's down there by the engine computer. Let's read the whole thing. Legacy on back models, what kind of located to ensure test mode is successful. Turn the key on position, do not start the engine, may hear the radiator fan cycle on, blah blah. After completing the function execution, please turn off the ignition and disconnect the test mode connector. Okay, so let's connect that up. Alright, so here's the test mode connector. I am going to single-handedly, hopefully, plug it in. So the car should start clicking and doing its test mode procedure. So key off, key on. There we go, fans are on. Stuff's clicking. Next step, start writing VIN, yes. VIN already registered in ECU. You cannot change VIN number, so Subaru, unfortunately, can only write the VIN once. That sucks, we can't get this computer to work. Alright, so I got the original ECM reinstalled, the original ignition coil, only hooked up 3 and 4, put the plugs in. Cylinders 1 and 2 have no plugs, they're just hanging out right here. Let's fire it up on 2 cylinders, maybe it will start. And then, well, they're going to have to get a brand new engine computer. Alright, let's see what happens here. So even though the car doesn't run, I was noticing a single spark on the dead coil. Why is that? Let's spin it over one more time. It should run on 2 cylinders, especially since 2 spark plugs are out. Is something wrong with the timing? So I switched the 2 coils around, and now it cranks. It doesn't even try to cough. But check out the spark. It's not consistent. It's kind of 1, 2, 3, blank. 1, 2, 3, blank. Let's try it. Not consistent. This engine computer is junk. We could measure cam and crank correlation. Crank sensor's right there, cam sensor's right here. But I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Even if we unplug the cam sensor, or the crank sensor is synced to the crank. Like that sprocket, you can't mess it up. So crank sensor is everything, especially in a waste spark system. The coil fires once per crank revolution. The cam should have nothing to do with this. It's not a coil on plug system, it's a waste spark. So yeah, definitely needs an engine computer since one of the drivers isn't working at all, and the other one is being erratic. So unfortunately that's the way it is. Alright, last experiment. On the picoscope we got 4 channels. Channel 1 is a sync on the high voltage wire going to cylinder number 4. That's the good coil, supposedly the one at least that's being triggered. Channel 2, PHAD pressure transducer in cylinder number 4. I want to see if that spark is consistently occurring near TDC. Channel 3, the blue channel, is going to be on the crankshaft position sensor wire. It's a 2-wire sensor. And finally, channel 4 is on the camshaft sensor. So we got all 4 channels right here. Let's see, when we crank this thing over, what do we see on the signals? Let me turn the key on. Alright, so key on, no difference. Let's restart the scope and crank it. Alright, so what do we make of this? You can see there's gaps in the spark. Sometimes there's no spark at all, which is weird. Sometimes there is. It's pretty close to TDC right there. But then we have 1, 2, 3, 4 sparks occurring per, per 2 crankshaft revolutions. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's fine, but how does that make any sense? If only one coil is alive, you'd expect spark, 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 then nothing here, or here, or here. So this is very interesting, and we see nothing on our camera crank wires. I don't know if one of them is a ground, one of them is a signal. I can move them to the other wire, but let's just save this waveform. Alright, let's try again. I switched the 2 wires on the cam and crank signals. Okay, this looks a little more promising. Alright, now it looks like we are on the correct wires for the cam and the crank. So the pattern is 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So this is 720 of the crank. That makes sense. There's 2 sync notches per revolution, a double and a single. And the spark is occurring at the sync notches. Now my question is, why do we see this when the other coil is dead? That's unless the spark's occurring twice as often on one coil. But either way, this looks like a bad engine computer. Very interesting case study. So if you look at this spark plug and listen to the cadence, that's exactly what's going on. This spark, the coil number whatever, the 3-4 coil is firing twice as often as it needs to, and the 1-2 coil is not firing whatsoever. Very bizarre case. So let's listen to the cadence and count the sparks. So you should only see 2 sparks per compression event. We're seeing 4. Nuts.